Thank you for inviting me here to come and share some thoughts. So whilst Katrina talked a little about the employee, I guess where we focus on Deloitte is more the organizational level and sort of global organizations. So we come in, where I specifically come at is from a sort of mobility, talent and rewards perspective and how global organizations think about this. Personally, I started my career in London, and then they shipped me out to Mumbai for a couple of years. I did some funky stuff there, shared service centers. I was part of a shared service center to learn about that. Then I was in Japan for 2 years, learned a bit of Japanese and learned how to use chopsticks. And then moved to New York for about 6 years, and then made it back to London about 5 years ago and focus on this. And I head up across EMEA, so spent a lot of my time traveling around the region, helping organizations think through some of these challenges. Was it my collar or was it the thing? Okay. So I guess before we're going to talk a little bit about leading in the new world of work, and this is based on some, we love surveys at Deloitte. We do loads of surveys, we research, and we tell everyone what we think. So our latest one is around human capital trends. It's about just over 3,000 global organizations, HR and business leaders. What are their most pressing issues in the world of work? So we're going to talk about some of that, and there's some country stuff we can kind of delve into. But why do we care? Why do we care about this? And for me, it gets back to why the world of work is changing. And that gets a little bit around to business and how businesses are changing. So you're probably familiar with this kind of graphic. I'm sure LinkedIn has an equally good one. This is the Facebook version, where it's all about interconnections. So this is our pictorial of all the internet connections around the world. So what it shows is we're all now more connected. Okay, we're really interconnected. Okay, that's great. So what does that mean? Well, it's driving innovation within businesses. The way things are done within business is changing rapidly. And as that changes, business model changes, it has a whole new requirement for workers and organization. And that's fundamentally the issue. And the rapid change within innovation in the business context has a whole set of challenges for us within the HR and organization. An example. Remember this place? This is where we used to go to buy a book. And this is less than 20 years ago. This is the only place we could go, to a nice bookshop. I like that book. And then some bright spark innovated and said, actually, we're going to send you a book via post. You can go online and get it. And we're like, wow, this is like 2003. That's ages ago, right? So it went through a major transformation. And this is fundamentally changing those business models. So if you're in a bookshop business, now you're in a kind of different online business. If you actually go to these places now, so if you go to like an Amazon warehouse, I was fortunate enough to go around there recently, they have these like robots running around between the aisles. There used to be people in there taking the books out, putting them in packages and sending them to the right place. 24/7 robots walking around the warehouse, making sure the right books go to the right places. And now we get our books from here. We just download them. So within less than 20 years, an industry has fundamentally changed, not once, but twice. And that has a whole different set of implications for that organization and other organizations in that space. And that is why the world of work's changing. And there's a couple of different views out there on this. So this guy, Thomas Friedman, he wrote this book about the world is flat. And he talked about technology, the internet age, how we all become connected, breaks down borders, countries, and we all become one big country. Don't worry about the look, it's fine. It's okay. So Thomas, he said that, and this is the world, and this is kind of one pervasive thought out there, that as we all becoming connected, culturally we become the same, organizations become the same, we all kind of do the same stuff. The lesser known book out there is this DHL. And I have a lot of spare time, so I read these kind of things. And the great postal company came out with this research, and they've been doing a number of years in a row now. And they take like 1 million data points across publicly sourced information around GDP, education, all that kind of good stuff. And they say, actually, to some extent we are connected, but we're getting more disconnected. And what they mean by disconnection is we're becoming more of a city-based world, not countries, cities. And we're moving into kind of the city-based talent hubs. And we kind of see that a little bit today. So you think about something like London, with our sort of creative and arts and our technology centers, whereas you think about Singapore and you think about the wealth capital and management of the world, was moved from Switzerland to Singapore. So if you play that out, and we see this across a number of countries, a number of regions, cities competing for talent, organizations getting together within cities to start thinking about how they attract talent for specific skill sets, then as an organization, this becomes really strange. You're like, how do we manage this for our global workforce? So within my company, I need X amount of tasks doing, and I probably have to go to different cities to find the best people to do that. So rather than bringing people to the jobs, do you provide the jobs to the people? And you think about that. So it becomes one sort of huge project management exercise of how you get things done. When we talked about the survey we done, so this is the 3,500 odd organizations around the world, and we call it Leading the New World of Work. And the kind of 4 key bits there, which Helene touched upon as well, we see this kind of the barriers between work and life dissolving, talent in high demand, kind of the generational, the mix-up of millennials coming in the workforce, and transparency, like companies like LinkedIn providing us all the information we need about jobs we have and don't have on other companies. And this leads to some interesting trends. So we came across, through this research, probably 10 key things, 10 things organizations think are really important. So the questions we asked, there were a number of questions, but essentially we dissected it through how important these issues were, and then how ready are you to address these issues? And these are the top 10 ones. We won't go through all of them, we'll just kind of pick out 5 and see how we go. Okay? So we ask how important things are and how ready you are. And the difference between how important you are and how ready you are gives you a capability gap, which is this bottom down here, right? So minus is we're not so good at this. We have some gaps. Yeah? So this is where the most important. So leadership is the biggest capability gap globally. Okay, 3,500 or 4,000 organizations saying this is our number one thing, followed by culture and engagement. So we delve a little bit further. So leadership. This comes, we've done a survey 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row now, and this is always in the top 1, 2, 3. Leadership capability is still keeping organizations awake at night. Only 6% would say their leadership pipeline is ready. Only 10% of organizations describe their succession plans as excellent. And this is probably sort of a short-term reactive view of leadership in terms of how you invest in it and perhaps who you define as leaders, and changing the definition of leaders. We're currently working with a French oil company at the moment, and I'm in Paris tomorrow to talk with them. And I was talking to the CEO, and this is the kind of thing, this keeps him awake at night. And he said, Andy, there's 2 problems being a French oil company. And I was okay, what are those? And he goes, well, number 1, there's no oil in France. I was like, that is a problem. And he goes, number 2, we're French. I was like, oh, what's the problem with that? And he goes, we just think we know everything. We're French, and we tell everyone, all our leaders are French. And my problem is, now we're in all these countries now. We're in Angola, we're in Mozambique, all across the globe. And I don't believe the guy that joins us in Angola thinks he can take my job. And that's wrong. He thinks only French people can take my job. And for us to succeed as an organization, because there's no more oil in France, we need to have these kind of greater leadership capabilities. So organizations now, how do we kind of bring this leadership development down to further layers in the organization? So they're creating specific leadership development programs further down the organization in different markets to make people feel that they could be these future leaders. All this data is available on the websites. You can slice and dice by kind of countries. I won't draw any great conclusions, I guess, by some of these kind of stats. And you've got the Nordics kind of down here. A lot of the leadership kind of capability gaps. So the bigger the minus number, the bigger the challenge. Probably aligned to some more of the emerging market countries. The number one issue, which is probably aligns to kind of why everyone here is today, is culture and engagement. This is organizations saying the culture of our company is become the number one issue. 50% say the problem is very important. This jumps significantly, double the average from last year. It's been growing and growing and growing. This is what everyone's saying is the number one issue this year. And that's really about, as people know, this kind of creating meaningful work, deep engagement, and job fit. So what does that mean for organizations? So my perception of this is, you look at things like LinkedIn, the job market, and you kind of have an oppression from the outside of culture. And you think that's kind of the culture and the talent attraction point of view. I'd like to work for that organization. And what organizations do internally, they kind of struggle to kind of make that happen. And it's really interesting on an international basis how that kind of applies on a country by country basis. So I had the pleasure of working with someone from Google whose job is global culture person. They all have strange names in Google. They kind of do something. And her job was just to go around and say, well, this is office space. The culture we have in this office, the one we have in California, should it be the same as the one in London, or the same one as Oslo, and the same as one in Japan? So the one in California has the big slide. The one in London has the big slide. And she goes around the world, should we have the slide? Should we have the slide in the Tokyo office? Should we have the slide? No, it doesn't fit. And there was kind of cultural fit of the slide. The slide does not work in Japan, so they don't have the slide in Japan. But it's this kind of culture thing where they're saying we need to make our spaces, our offices kind of feel culturally the same, but there's kind of local nuances as well. Again, kind of varies kind of by region. Again, probably not a lot of differentiation across there. Again, emerging market economies, kind of thinking about that. Some of the developed economies seem to have a better handle on this. We talked a little about this, workforce on demand. So if you go back 3, 5, 10 years ago, as an employer, it was kind of easy because you made a job offer to someone and they became your employee. You put them in your organization, you knew who they were, you knew how much you paid them, you could sort of control them, tell them how to perform, manage their career, all that good stuff. Now organizations have a broader ecosystem of people they manage, and we call this kind of the open talent economy. So you have your employees, check, we like them. Employees, we know how to do, we know good things about employees. We have people who are lone staff, we have joint ventures, we have part-time people, we have contractors, we have contingent workforce, we have people in zero contract hours. A third of the US workforce is contingent workers. In the UK, we're approaching that number as well. And these are people who sit outside your organization but work with you. So as an organization, how do you react to that challenge? How do you create a common culture, a common learning platform with people who don't necessarily sit within your ecosystem? So some organizations are starting to think about this now. We work with one who've wrapped all their contingent workers on short-term contracts into one common employment company. We place an employment company somewhere in Europe, doesn't really matter where, a good place to put it, and we pay them all the same regardless of where they come from. Again, create some bond, some sort of culture, so whilst they're contingent workers, they are part of an organization within an organization. Again, varies by kind of country. Japan seems to be the top of this in terms of using contingent workers, which may kind of correlate to kind of skill shortages and people exiting the labor market. Next one, simplification of work. I like this one. I keep telling my boss about this one. Let's make it simple. So 70% need to make it simplify work. The need is really important. So 10% of organizations now have simplification programs in place. 22% of them are starting these. How do we make it? Deloitte last year, when we came out with this research, we had this publication called The Overwhelmed Employee. It was our most read publication ever. And it's about the stresses of people working 24/7, borderless, travel, all that good stuff. And organizations are saying, maybe we need to change this. So this is what organizations think about. And I think some of the stuff we'll be talking about, sort of office space, culture, all kind of plays into this. And it's not necessarily about doing more with less, it's doing less things better. And from a organizational design, that could be things like organizational agility, allowing people to work in kind of different ways. Something at Deloitte we do a lot of, helping people with different backgrounds, different circumstances to engage with the organization, from virtual workspaces, different hours, different holidays, that good stuff. And even for things like the bureaucracy within an organization. Things like HR could do around performance management. So performance management, if you look at that, this is a whole industry around that. There's forms, there's processes, there's conversations, organizations are now saying, why, this is not effective. This is very bureaucratic and is not helping our employees. So just getting rid of the performance management. In Deloitte, we have no performance management system. We have performance management, which is about career conversations. Every single day we have this concept that you must ask whoever you're working with 2 questions. What did I do well? What could I do better? And let's make it a conversation. And at the end of the year, we have this thing called pay and reward, which we talk about, this person, we should pay them more because they performed exceedingly well, which is not performance management. Over the years, those worlds have kind of collided, and people talk about pay and performance as the same thing. Performance management is about career development. It's about leadership development. It's about cultural fit. Paying people is reward, and that's a different thing. The last one, a little bit back to our picture of machines as talent. Collaboration competition. This is kind of a new one that came out this year. People are aware of cognitive kind of technologies out there. There's a study by Oxford University about over the next decade or 2 decades, half the jobs in the US and UK will arose due to automation. So that being a big challenge for an organization within HR. How do we start thinking about reskilling people? And this is live today. We see organizations fundamentally changing their business model, like the bookstore, like the Amazons. Like, how do we think about the skills we need? Because the people we employ today will need different skill sets for the jobs they're going to do tomorrow, because some of those jobs will erode and some of their jobs are being used by technology. So again, how active can we be about helping organizations think through that? So in summary, some of the 6 key areas. So the softer areas, such as culture engagement, leadership and development, have become urgent priorities. Leadership and learning, the capability gap here is widening. Organizations, still top issue, but the gap of their capability in solving this is increasing. HR as a function itself, as Deloitte, we keep going on about this, but the reality of it is, as business models change, we believe the business models are changing so quickly that HR is playing catch up, but it's falling behind that kind of race, and it's really hard to keep catching up. So organizations need to think about that, because some of the skills HR did, HR generalists, are probably not that relevant in today's world. HR technology. So this has grown 50% in the last 5 years, investments in HR technology, perhaps not giving the benefits that people see. HR spend has gone up 4% every year the last 5 years, whereas technology spend has gone up 50%. So we see organizations rightly investing in technology, but not perhaps investing in the downside things around training, people, processes to kind of support that technology. Talent analytics. So we talk loads about analytics, all about analytics. We see organizations hiring data scientists. Again, we're kind of at the start of that journey. Organizations know they need to do this. Yeah, we know we need it. Analytics will do it. I'm starting to think about how do we do it? Is our data good enough? What questions do we need to ask? So we'll see that over the next 4 or 5 years really taken full forward in organization sites. And the simplification is an emerging theme. This is the new one, we just talked about now. And HR can solve part of that problem as well. The other part of my life, I spent a lot of time thinking about kind of global mobility and people moving cross-border. And historically, again, like HR, that was kind of a simple thing to do. Moving around the world was kind of simple. The UN devised a system of mobility sort of 50, 60 years ago. Andy, you live in London, go to New York, give you a UK salary, we're going to give you housing, we're going to give you some cost of living, going to ship you, you go there, you come back, that's nice. Okay, that's easy. Now organizations are saying, well, that's good, we can kind of solve that. But we needed to do something else. What about people commuting? What about people working on projects? What about people building virtual teams? How do we support that as a HR function? So again, we kind of track that gap over the number of years about what organizations wanted to do versus what it does. 2% of these 3,000 global organizations say they do global mobility well in 2012. So we've been helping them, and we've moved the needle, to 8%. Look at that. We've moved the needle to 8%. And we're like, wow, all this work we've been doing with clients hasn't been working? But then, so we come up with a different theory. We're like, the goalposts have shifted. That's what our theory is, right? And I totally believe it's to do with the business models. So as business models change, your requirements of an organization change, the supporting functions change. And we term it kind of more business-driven global mobility. So is it really about global mobility or is it about global agility? Is it about managing expatriates, or is it about managing a global workforce? And to me, that's where it is. Organizations having a global view of their workforce and looking at their supply-demand mechanism. So for instance, if you know you're going to grow in China the next 5 years, most companies will have a nice revenue plan. We're going to go in China, this is going to be the revenue, this is going to be a profit, it's going to be great. Everyone's like, wow, okay, that's great. So what are the people plans for that? What? There's no people plan, right? What are those numbers around that? And say, okay, we're going to hire loads of people. Okay, does that make sense? So organizations now, we're trying to challenge them is like, well, you have 3 options here for your growth. You have 3 levers on this fruit machine of growth you can pull. Number 1, global mobility. We can ship people over there, move them there to keep the growth. Number 2, talent acquisition. We can hire loads of people. Or number 3, we can train them, learning and development. And those 3 within an organization tend not to talk to each other. And as a business, no one knows which one to pull. I don't know, let's just hire loads of people. So I had a client the other week saying, we just hired everyone in China. We're going to grow. But then you look at the cost and the skills of the people they're hiring in China, it's cheaper to send UK expats over. Everyone's like, no, expats are expensive. No, it's cheaper for them. And that's getting that business decisions right. How do you kind of think about that? So in the future, we see this kind of non-standard mobility increasing, prevalence of different models and capabilities to kind of support an organization. The hyper-specialism of the skills, I think, gets back to the original point, is around, as you get a kind of more talent-based hubs, city culture, we're seeing this 2-tiered labor market, the very, very highly skilled, people doing more minutiae skill sets within an organization. So the supply chain of things you need to do in an organization requires smaller supply chain set of skills. And therefore, you start rethinking the way you employ people. The way we've employed people has always been the same. It's like, if I'm in London, I go and work for a London company and they employ me. Is that right? Is that the right thing to do? If you had a blank piece of paper now, you certainly would not draw it like that. So other leading organizations are creating different types of employment models, not just your standard domestic employment model, to think about how they create global mindset. Why not just pay people the same regardless where they come from, where they sit? There's different ways of thinking about it. So in conclusion, there's just 2 words. And for us, it's about being bold. Understanding those business changes means we have to stand up to those challenges and think about how we interact with those. Thank you.